I want to spend a little time with the bigger kids and talking to you a little bit more about Christmas. Now, Christmas is a time of stories about waiting. Think about Israel waiting for a king. Think about Simeon and Anna waiting for a savior. Think about the Magi waiting for a star to show them the way to the place where the King of the Jews was born. Think about Mary and Joseph waiting for baby Jesus to be born, and then all of a sudden the first Christmas happened. He was born. Listen to Luke chapter 2. Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the city of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and the family of David, in order to register along with Mary, who was engaged to him and was with child. While they were there, the days were completed for her to give birth, and she gave birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him in cloths and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for him in the inn. And every year we celebrate Christmas. Again and again, year after year, we celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. We celebrate, we decorate, we buy presents, we give presents, and we do that to remind us that Jesus Christ is the gift worth waiting for. The closer December 25th gets, the more we feel the wait, the more we get excited about the celebration and the family and the food and the presents. And when December 25th gets here, we open all the gifts, and it seems like that before it started, it's already over. I mean, it just happens so fast. And the next thing we know, we're waiting again, 364 more days until Christmas. There's just a lot of waiting when it comes to Christmas. And I think there just might be a lesson to be learned in all the waiting. There's a man named Saul. He was the first king over Israel. He was chosen by God to be the ruler over his people. And early in his reign, he had an encounter with some of his enemies, the Philistines. The Philistines had come against Israel, and Saul had gathered an army, and yet the people of Israel were terrified. The Philistines were a great and awesome army. They'd come and they gathered around the Israelite army. But Samuel, the prophet of God, had told Saul, I'm going to come and I'm going to make offerings to the Lord. He has chosen you to be king over his people. You don't need to be concerned about these enemies. God is with you. I'm going to come. We're going to offer sacrifices, and then you will lead the people into victory. Saul was told to wait at a particular place for Samuel to come and make those offerings, and Saul and the army waited. And they waited, and they waited. Saul became anxious. He became nervous. The people became more and more scared. Some of the people began to flee away, and the Philistines were gathering. And Saul could not wait anymore. He did not want to wait any longer. He went ahead and he made the offerings to the Lord himself. And sure enough, as soon as he was done making those offerings, because he could not wait any longer, Samuel showed up. And he said to Saul, "What have you done?" Saul essentially said, I couldn't wait any longer. The people were scared and they were leaving, and I had no choice. I couldn't wait any longer. You didn't come. I had to do this. And Samuel said to Saul, you should have waited, because you've not obeyed the Lord. He's taken the kingdom from you, and he has sought out another man who has a heart after the Lord, who will wait on the Lord. Saul should have waited. There was something good in the waiting, and Saul missed it. Not long after that, Samuel comes to a house of a young man named David. And Samuel anoints David as the new king over Israel. You see, David was the one that the Lord found that had a heart after the Lord. He was willing to wait on the Lord. I suspect that David could not have imagined what his life would be like after being anointed king over Israel. You see, David had to wait. He waited over 2 decades from the time he was anointed as king over Israel to actually become the king over all Israel. 20 years of waiting until he was able to experience what he was promised. And those 2 decades of waiting were anything but easy. There were times when Saul was the one pursuing David to try to kill David. David had to leave the nation of Israel and go live in a foreign land. He was basically in exile. He was the coming king. He was anointed king, but he had to wait, and his waiting was incredibly difficult, and yet still he waited because he was a man after God's own heart. He knew that God was worth waiting for. Did you know that there were a couple times while David waited when he was being pursued by Saul? Saul was trying to kill David, that David could have killed Saul and instantly become king by killing Saul. But he didn't do it. He didn't take matters into his own hands. He decided he would continue to wait because he knew there was something good in the waiting. Our lives are more like a perpetual wait than anything else. You think back when you were a kid, I'm sure either you said or sung or wanted to sing the song, "All I want for Christmas is my 2 front teeth." I can't wait to lose my 2 front teeth. And then as you got into high school, you would say things like, "I can't wait to get my driver's license. I can't wait to graduate from high school. I can't wait to go to college or get that first job. I can't wait to finish college. I can't wait to meet my spouse and get married. I can't wait to have a great job. I can't wait to have children. I can't wait to have an empty nest. I can't wait till I retire." I mean, it's just this constant, I can't wait, because this life is really like a perpetual wait, and there's something really good about that. There's something really good about the wait. You see, the reality is this side of heaven, life is more like a perpetual wait. But the other side of heaven is perpetual fulfillment. And all this waiting, this side of heaven, reminds us day after day that no matter what this life offers us, the weight in our heart cannot be fully satisfied by anything this side of heaven. We are waiting for something, the other side of heaven, that can fully and totally satisfy our hearts. That is why the wait is so good. One time Jesus was in Jerusalem, and he was in the temple area where there was a gate and a pool. And by the pool there were many people who were lame and sick, blind and crippled. And they were waiting. They were all just laying there waiting because they believed that if the pool was miraculously stirred, that the first person that was able to get into the pool would be healed. There was one man there that had been suffering for 38 years. 38 years he'd been waiting to be healed. No telling how many days and months and years he had waited, spent hours upon hours waiting next to that pool. And Jesus walked by that man, and he said to that man, "Do you want to be well?" Now, I honestly don't know how that man kept from replying to Jesus sarcastically. Maybe that shows you something about my personality, but I mean, you're kind of like, well, I'm here on a mat, the pool's right there, I can't move. Do I want to be well? But this is what he says to Jesus. He says to Jesus, "There's no one who's here that will help me get into the pool. And while I'm trying to get there, someone always beats me to it." And Jesus looked at him and he said, "Pick up your mat and walk." And instantly the man was healed, and he picked up his mat. I suspect that walk is not an accurate description of what he did at that moment. Can you imagine the excitement and the thrill after 38 years being able to pick up your mat and walk away from that pool that you've been waiting by year after year after year to no avail. He's getting up with that mad and excitement and enthusiasm. Jesus kind of slips away in the crowd, and the man comes face to face with some Pharisees. And they say to him, "Why are you carrying your mat?" You see, this day was the Sabbath day, and it was against the law to pick up your mat and walk with it on the Sabbath day. And the Pharisees said to this man, "Why are you sinning?" And the man says, wait a minute, hold on just a second. This is not my fault. The one who healed me told me to pick up my mat and walk. And the Pharisees, "Well, who did that?" "I don't know who it was. I don't know where he is. I don't know who it was." But Jesus wanted that man to know. You see, this was this man's moment to discover that all those years waiting next to that pool, he was not really waiting for the waters of that pool to be stirred. He was not really waiting for someone to pick him up and put him into that pool. No, all those years, he was really waiting for Jesus. And this was his moment to discover that Jesus was the one he was really waiting for. And so Jesus finds him because he wants this man to know that he is the one he's been waiting for. And Jesus just says a simple thing to him. He says, "You've been made well. Now stop sinning, or something worse will happen to you." And this is the moment where the man should have responded by saying, "I've got a problem then. If something worse is going to happen to me if I keep on sinning, I've got a significant problem because from the time you healed me until this moment, I've already been told I'm sinning." I mean, this is the moment where the man should have said to Jesus, "Wait a minute, if I've got to stop sinning or something worse is going to happen to me than the 38 years of my suffering, then I've got a dilemma. And if you're the one that healed me physically, maybe you're the one that has the answer to the real problem of my life. I can't stop sinning." But he never asked that question. Maybe it was because he was healed and he thought that was really what he needed. Maybe it was because the Pharisees had put pressure on him because he went right back to them and said, "I want to tell you who did it to me." And he basically turns Jesus in. That man missed that he was really waiting for Jesus and that Jesus alone could solve the problem of his sin. You know, the reality is that in our lives, we have a lot of pools that through the course of our lives we wait at. Pools of healing. We lay down by the pool of getting a better job. We lay down by the pool of getting more money. We lay down by the pool of getting out of debt. We lay down by the pool of getting married, having children, relocating, getting a better job, getting a promotion, getting a reward, things working out the way we want them to work out, getting a new car, getting a different house. I mean, we lay down at a lot of pools of healing in our life, waiting for that pool to be stirred so we can get that one thing. And what we discover every time we lay down by one of those pools that have to do with our future is that when we get it, or if we don't get it, it really wasn't what we were waiting for. You see, the problem of our lives is not solved by more accomplishments, more things, more possessions, more achievements, just the right home, just the right family. The problem of our lives is not solved by the things we can acquire in this life. The problem of our life is sin. And there's only one remedy for our sin, and his name is Jesus Christ. And everything we think we're waiting for will leave us wanting, because the one thing that can solve the problem of our hearts is Jesus Christ. He alone is worth waiting for. Jesus Christ is the only one who can solve the problem of our hearts. And for that reason, he alone is worth waiting for. We can all get everything we want for Christmas. And it won't be very long before we start wanting something else and something more. It's an incredible reminder that the only one who can really satisfy our hearts is Jesus Christ, because He alone is the answer for everything we need. He is worth the wait, and is the only one that can satisfy us. One time, Paul, a follower of Jesus Christ, was in Athens. And he happened to be in Athens because he was waiting for some friends to come there and meet him, and then they all would go on together to another city named Corinth. And so Paul's waiting in Athens while his friends are traveling, and as Paul waits, he kind of takes a little tour of Athens, checking things out, and he begins to notice in Athens there are a lot of spiritual people, a lot of people worshiping a lot of things, but none of them are worshiping the one true God. None of them know about Jesus Christ. And so Paul gets fired up about this. He's walking around realizing there are people everywhere in Athens that do not know about Jesus, and he just gets fired up about that. And as he waits for his friends to come, he begins to talk about Jesus Christ to others. He goes to the marketplace where there's a gathering of people, and he just begins to have conversation after conversation with everybody who will listen to him in the marketplace. And he's telling them about Jesus because he knows that they won't know about Jesus unless he tells them. And so he's making the most of his waiting by telling others about Jesus, and word spreads. And next thing you know, he gets an invitation to come to this place called the Areopagus, this public forum where people are invited to speak publicly so that they can share with many people ideas and thoughts about life and the future. Paul is invited to come and speak. He stands up in the Areopagus and he proclaims Jesus Christ. Because Paul proclaimed Jesus Christ as he waited for his friends to come, there are people in Athens who came to believe in Jesus Christ. Had Paul thought that his waiting for his friends meant that he can just hang out and do whatever he wants in Athens and not worry about a thing, then all of those people in Athens would have missed hearing the gospel. But Paul recognized his waiting provided an opportunity. The reality is that we are all waiting. Every one of us who has decided to follow Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior, we are waiting day in and day out for Jesus to come and take us to another city. And as we wait, if we just look around, we'll quickly recognize that we live in a place very much like Athens. A place where people are worshiping all kinds of things. Where many have never heard about Jesus, where many will never hear about Jesus unless someone who knows that Jesus is worth the wait tells them about Jesus. One thing that makes our waiting work so well is making sure that as we wait, we proclaim to our world that Jesus Christ is worth the wait. Because only we know that, and we live in a world that needs to hear it. If you want to wait for Jesus and wait for Him well, then wait and proclaim that He is worth the wait. 3 of Jesus' close friends were siblings, Mary and Martha and Lazarus. And trouble had come to their family because Lazarus had become sick. Mary and Martha, they sent word to Jesus that Lazarus, his friend, was sick, a subtle invitation for Jesus to come and heal him. They all knew that if Jesus would come, that he could heal Lazarus' sickness. Well, Jesus responded to the opportunity to go with his disciples by telling his disciples, this sickness will not end in death, but instead it will end in the glory of the Son of God. And then Jesus began to linger in the city he was at for a whole nother day and a whole nother day. Meanwhile, Mary and Martha were back home waiting. They were waiting for Jesus to come. Lazarus was waiting. But Jesus lingered. At the end of the second day, Jesus said to his disciples, Lazarus is asleep. And they were like, that's great. Maybe he's getting some rest. He'll get better. And Jesus is like, no, guys, what I meant is Lazarus is dead. That moment had to be a little confusing for the disciples because earlier Jesus had said this sickness will not end in death, and then Jesus tells the disciples Lazarus is dead. They've never heard Jesus make a mistake before. And Jesus just told them it would not end in death, but now he's dead. This had to be a confusing moment for the disciples. And Jesus says, now it's time to go back. What's going on? In the moment that Lazarus died, Mary and Martha had been waiting for Jesus, but at that moment when Lazarus died, they stopped waiting for Jesus. They then began to go through the funeral and the burial because it took Jesus 4 days to get from where he was to where Lazarus had been buried. So 4 days later, Jesus comes into the community and arrives at the home and is announced to the family that he has arrived. And Martha runs out to Jesus and she says to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. I was waiting for you. You didn't come. Well, Mary follows not long after and says to Jesus the very same thing her sister said. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. We were waiting for you. You didn't come. Those that were watching this unfold were saying between themselves, surely, if Jesus had been here, he could have healed Lazarus. Why didn't he come? And Jesus said in that moment, the tension of that moment, Jesus says, I want you to roll the stone covering the grave away. Well, Mary protests. She says, look, he's been dead for 4 days. It's going to be terrible. And Jesus says, I want you to roll the stone away because you're going to see the glory of God. They rolled that stone away, and Jesus said, Lazarus, come forth. And Lazarus walks out of that grave alive. I can guarantee you this, the disciples, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus will never think about waiting for Jesus the same way again. That moment unveiled that what Jesus said, it would not end in death, was exactly true. Even though he said he had died, Jesus all along was crafting a moment, was working in the waiting so that he might glorify himself, so that everybody that looked on there might say that Jesus is always worth waiting for because Jesus is always working for his glory while we wait. Mary and Martha and Lazarus would have said, we did not know that this was going on. We wondered where you were. We wanted to say to you, if you'd only been here, and yet now we see that you were at work the entire time. We should have waited even better. We should have waited even longer. We should have never given up or thought ill of you because the entire time we should have been waiting, knowing that you were working to accomplish your glory, and that's why our wait would have been worth it. So worth it. Here we are. We're waiting for Jesus. And I want you to know that when things get hard and things get difficult and things get challenging, that while we wait, no matter what we face, good or bad, that Jesus Christ is always working for his glory. He's working in our lives. He's working around us in this world. And He's always working to orchestrate all things ultimately for His glory so that you and I, as we wait, might see Him and know Him and embrace Him and find tastes and glimpses of what's to come in seeing and knowing Him this side of heaven so that we might be a people who say, I am waiting for Jesus Christ no matter what. All the other things that promise satisfaction, that leave us wanting, are things I can gladly leave behind or use for the glory of Jesus, because everything in this life will leave me wanting, pointing me to Jesus Christ, who alone is worth the wait. And as I wait for Him, no matter what, He's working in my life so that I might be encouraged to continue to wait for Him. As we wait, Jesus Christ is always at work for His glory. So that when people watch our lives, they will understand who we're waiting for and be able to join us in our waiting. Jesus is always working for His glory as we wait. And that's why our waiting always is worth it. David says it like this in the Psalm 27, verse 13 and 14. He says, I would have despaired had I not seen, had I not believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Be strong. Let your heart take courage. Yes, wait for the Lord. The prophet Isaiah in Isaiah chapter 64 verse 4 says, from the days of old, the ear has not heard nor perceived, nor eye has seen a God beside you who acts on behalf of the one who waits for Him. Wait for Him. He is worth the wait. And someday, Jesus will fulfill all His promises, and He will return. And on that day, our waiting will be proved to have been worth it beyond our imagination. And that day will be a very Merry Christmas indeed. So wait on Jesus Christ.